All right, we are live talking about web presence today. We got Charles Smith, Daniel Mandrick, and Paul Allen Clifford. My name's Tim Adams. I'll be your moderator slash host slash MC. I don't know. Anyway, let's dive right in. We're talking about web presence and why it's important. But first, I think we need to explain and define what it is. So I'm going to have Paul lead us off. How would you define web presence?
I think we were talking just before you started the recording about how it's leaving footprints wherever you go online, and I think that's a great working definition that you can just be a consumer of everything online, or you can be a giver, someone who puts stuff out there, and it might be just as simple as a sentence or a like or something indicating that you were there. And that can sometimes make a huge difference. I know as I'm making content, anytime someone reaches out to me and says, hey, I like this, or hey, I've got this question, it just really speaks a lot to me. So that's something that I think is really, really important across the board.
Excellent. So as far as let's talk about places that you probably are already leaving a footprint. Um, Daniel, I'm going to have you take this one on. So as far as web presence, obviously we're talking about website, for the church, and that's kind of an obvious one. But what other places online do you think we as Christians are interacting on a regular basis?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious one. There's this the Google Plus community here. Um, and right now, I'm sorry, my mind is blanking out here for a second. But you might have to come back to me because I just lost everything in my head.
Oh, that's no fun. No fun at all. Charles, you want to tackle that one?
Sorry, I kind of got distracted too for a second there. Sorry.
All right, I'll take the lead. So I'm kind of what I was going after was social media, Facebook and Twitter, and Paul kind of hit on that. But maybe some places that aren't so readily identifiable, blogs that you read or subscribe to. Maybe musical sharing sites or file sharing sites. If you're single, maybe online dating. I'm not going to judge and say that you should or shouldn't. That's up to you. But it's kind of shocking how widespread our potential influence is online. And I think it's important that we not only capitalize on those opportunities that present themselves, and nobody's perfect. We're all going to have missed opportunities, but also to be aware and help your church be aware of what their reputation is online, what their image is online, and ways that they can maybe improve that. What do you guys think?
Makes perfect sense to me.
Well, I gotta jump in here again. I'm just remembering some of my stuff here. One of the things that first came to mind about web presence was when you were talking about blogs. One thing popped in my head that one thing Jeremy on this site actually has been really encouraging me to start maybe using some of my experiences and putting them out onto either a video or a text blog of some sort. And like this summer, I just finished a 2-month stint at a summer camp and just learning about, okay, what's our presence look like from just our YouTube stuff that we post to YouTube. Kind of teaching some of the younger guys who are in charge of the social media what that means, how that reflects on the camp, etc. and even just how I act on Facebook. I have to be very, very specific and careful about how I respond, because as many people run into this problem when they get upset, sometimes they say things they should have thought through, and I've had to be very intentional about setting up some safeguards against that, because I get myself into trouble sometimes.
I gotcha. Charles, do you have any thoughts?
Well, the thing that Daniel may have hinted on there, as far as reputation and churches and, getting frustrated and sometimes venting on social media where you have to choose your words carefully, I think that might have been where he was hinting on. A thing that sometimes can kind of come in handy is to have a private group for, like, church members only, that not necessarily that the public can see. So, like, in the case of our church, we actually had a private Facebook group for, I would say, almost 2 years before we ever had a public Facebook page. And that might be a good practice for, churches that don't have a social media presence. Create a public, I said that wrong, private group for yourselves, get the practice in, if you will, of dealing with each other on social media in a private setting before you're ready to go public. That way, you know how to kind of always keep a positive message on your public site, but yet the private one can be used to work through issues if need be. So that's something that we didn't necessarily head out with those intentions, but it definitely proved to work out good in the end, because if we had started with a public Facebook page first, it would have turned into some probably serious drama a couple of times.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think a lot of times churches are scared, or leaders are scared that their reputation online is going to be somehow tarnished or stained because their members are interacting with so many different groups of people. Both believers and non-believers, both in the church world and in the secular world. And understanding kind of both what we're talking about, your effect and your reputation, your influence personally online, as well as your churches, is and how you potentially respond can affect that. If you lose the respect of people online, then anything associated with you is going to be affected, including the church that you go to. Because if you lose the respect, you essentially lose your credibility, right? And I think it's important that we understand, as Christians, we're called to treat people with love and kindness, and let's talk about that, because I know that it's very popular with social media, particularly giving everybody the same platform to rant and talk about what it is they, what their experience at Starbucks was and how rude the barista was, So maybe we can kind of contextualize this to say, what should we be putting out there? What mindset should we be having when we're referencing our church personally to our own networks? And I see that we have Zach Delano just came in. So Zach, I'm not sure if he's up yet, but Zach, jump in on this question after we go to Paul.
I think that you make a really good point, Tim, that we need to be careful. I think I proposed, we don't actually have someone to do this, but I proposed at our church that we could have someone who his or her only role is to kind of look out, not for people that were trying to be mean to the church, but for people that had good intentions but were not necessarily doing things well, or for people that just had, they had a bad day, Sister Susie that sometimes gets a little angry, that kind of thing, and so that there's someone to help them through that and deal with that. But I think that one of the huge failings in the contemporary church, and I mean capital C church, like across the board, is a problem with not really taking Matthew 18 seriously. When you have a problem, going to the person. Doesn't say anywhere, Jesus doesn't say, if your brother offends you, make sure that you broadcast that everywhere so that you can be understood, because you're so valuable that your opinion really. No, Jesus didn't say anything like that. So I think that that's something that we need to take seriously. I think we need to take seriously that sometimes you don't know the whole story. And one thing that I'm quite frankly very tired of is all the people that think that their mission from God is to be as mean as possible to people that claim to be brothers and sisters. And I just don't see that anywhere. I see that there were people in the first century that were trying to create their own gospel. That's different. There were the Pharisees. That's different. But I don't see Paul or Peter just laying into each other in different parts of the New Testament and talking about how evil their intentions were. But I see that in the modern church like crazy. And so I think that one thing that we really ought to do is we really, really ought to be careful about what we say about each other. Because Jesus said that people would believe in him because they saw how we love each other. So I really wish we would do more of that.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Zach, are you able to join us? Maybe. Well, while we're waiting for Zach, Charles, do you want to dovetail on that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything that's being said as far as, we need to show love as much as possible. Back to the thing I was kind of hinting on about, private Facebook groups for church members, everybody's in a different place with their walk spiritually. And, you're going to have some people that, when they feel offended by somebody, they're going to want to have a place to vent. So that's kind of like that private Facebook group. Typically what we use it for is, internal announcements, here's when we're doing this, here's when we're doing that, this sort of thing. But, if somebody has something that they want to vent about and get it out there and find somebody to talk to help work through that issue, it serves as that, but it keeps it from the rest of the public so that, your public Facebook page doesn't become a bunch of rants and raves and people bickering at one another. Because, if you see that on your public Facebook page, yeah, people never want to come to your church. But every church has its internal bickerings that happen from time to time. And it's a matter of, how you handle that. So, like I say, once again, with having that private Facebook group, it gives people an opportunity to vent, especially if an issue's not known, if it's something that somebody's been keeping to themselves and nobody knows what's going on, and gives them an outlet for somebody to kind of work with them and consult with them. Which, of course, as I'm talking about this, I see ways to improve it by having a leader or a mentor in that group to, maybe console the people that, need help from time to time when they vent. That's something we don't formally have. But, yeah, definitely we need to try to treat each other with love, that's for sure.
This brings up an interesting experience that I had within the last month. I was running sound at church. Worship leader was, for some reason, under a fair amount of stress, and some words were said in a tone that was not normal in my direction, and it really just kind of put me off. It really just, how sometimes people say something to you in a certain tone that just makes you want to, it just really torques you off. And that's kind of what happened. And I think a lot of us struggle myself included, with just harboring that and not having the courage to approach the person and say, you know, you said this in a tone that made me feel like this, and I trust your heart towards me, so I don't think you meant it that way. So is there something going on that, you know, maybe I can pray for you about? And really changing how we approach that instead of saying, well, I'm hurt, you hurt me, so now I'm going to lash back out at you, either online or I'm going to go gossip about this to other people behind your back, instead of doing what the Bible tells us to do, right? And essentially is, if you have a problem with somebody, you go to them. And we should be mature enough to be able to take that feedback and not get angry ourselves, but to say, you know what, I hurt this person and I didn't mean to, so I'm going to apologize, and, you know, that kind of an attitude, rather than I'm hurt, so I'm going to use this worldwide platform to go rant, you know. And I don't know if you guys see this all the time, but I see it almost every week. Somebody going off, and they're really vague, right? So they'll either post out there some kind of theoretical story. Well, what if this happened? What would you do, right? Or this happened to me, but I'm going to be really vague about it, and blah, blah, blah. You guys see that at all? Daniel? All right, Daniel, you take it on.
Well, considering, like, I work with teenagers every day, and so I see their Facebook stuff all the time, and I see this day in and day out, and I'm gonna kind of tailor this response because I was thinking while we were talking with Paul, some of Paul's stuff there. One thing I think people really don't understand yet, even though social media has been around for a few years, it's still fairly new. People are still learning how to live with it. They're still learning how to live on it. And my parents brought me up to always be thinking, okay, where's the other person coming from in this situation? Why are they having such a bad day? Maybe they got their car hit or something like that. But there's no one yet who's teaching or being around to teach people on a day-to-day basis on, okay, how do you use this freedom on the web properly? Like when you're growing up as a kid, your parents get on you for saying stuff. It's like, don't say that, that's rude. But there's nothing like that on the web necessarily or all the time. So I think that's a big thing that I think not just us as a church, but us as like caregivers and parents and leaders have a chance to help push this in a direction toward maybe some internet, for lack of better words, manners. But yeah, I think so. Like when it comes to the students that I work with, I'm often when I get a student just saying, well, so and so being such a jerk and yada yada yada. My first response is actually to private message them and ask them the very same thing that my mother would put me through. What do you think went on in that person's life today? And they generally hate it, but after a while, they start to think some of this through. And I've only seen a tiny little minute change in one kid in the 4 years that I've worked at the school, but I mean, I think that's a big thing that we need to pay attention to, is not just our own output to the web, but how we respond to other people's output.
That makes actually perfect sense. Well said. All right, Mr. Zach, let's give it a try.
Okay, is it working?
Yes, we have
Good.
you.
Right on. Cool. Yeah, no, I agree with. I kind of got in late, but yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying. It's good. It's good stuff. I think it's a tremendous platform that we have that is, yeah, like you guys said, relatively recent in development, and there really aren't any stated rules for it. I mean, there's general social etiquette, but there are totally different fields that you can get into. When it comes to social media. So yeah, I just think there's a really good medium to connect with people in a different way, and yeah, it's a good thing to learn how to harness.
Good deal. Good deal. So we've kind of talked about why it's so important. Maybe now let's transition into how can we identify opportunities to minister. And it's sounding like there's a fair amount of opportunities already to minister to our own brethren, our own brothers and sisters inside our own local churches. So maybe we can talk about that, as well as, what maybe you guys could think of some examples of what would be an opportunity for you to minister to somebody online. Where would that be? What would it look like? And why would you choose to engage in a certain circumstance versus a different one? I know that's very open-ended, but I'm being vague kind of on purpose. I want to see where your brains go. So, Charles, I want to kind of throw this one at you, see what happens.
I was sitting here going, no, not me, no, not me. But, because seriously, right now, I mean, as far as web presence and social media, I feel like we're in the infant ages. When you first start with a social media page, it's all about, here's what we're doing. Come see us. It's all self-promotion, trying to keep it positive. It's not necessarily ministering per se. It's more advertising. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is more advertising and less ministering, because, even in our own communities, we're a small church, hardly anybody knows us. We've had members come to us, they'll drive up to a local gas station. Where's such and such church? What? What church? Huh? So when you're in that stage of getting started in social media, you're kind of really in more of an advertising space than you are a ministering space, because people don't even know you. Now, once people get to know you, yeah, you can get into ministering, but honestly, what can you do to minister? I mean, the only thing I can say of that we've done a little bit with our Facebook page is, besides the advertising or promoting of our own stuff, we, occasionally will put up some inspirational picture or quote or something like that. That can be a simple form of ministry. Not, cute, cuddly kitten pictures, but, something meaningful and has some meaning to it. So that's probably a good start if you're getting started. But beyond that, honestly, I don't know yet. So I'll have to defer to the next person.
Okay. Well, it's kind of a loaded question. It's like 3 different questions in one. So, Paul, you have an interesting comment here in the chat. Tell us about the jab, 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 right hook model.
Yeah, so it's Gary Vaynerchuk, or he goes by Gary V, because when your last name is Vaynerchuk, you go by just the initial. And he's a guy, he started off with a show called Wine Library TV. He's the son of immigrants from, I think, the Ukraine, and they had a wine store, and whatever you think about that, pass by that and go to this, which is, he decided 10 years or so ago that he was going to make his family wine business bigger by going online. So he started by making like videos and just answering every question that he could and telling every story that he could and just reaching out to people and trying to really enchant them with everything good about his business. And anytime, along the same topic, anytime he sees someone complain about his business, he gets happy, because that's an opportunity for him to do something. So if someone is complaining, he thinks, okay, I can win them back. And then he just goes all out and does everything he can think of to win them back, because if they complain, then he knows they're dissatisfied. Whereas if they just keep to themselves, he doesn't know. Well, his latest book is called Jab, 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 Right Hook, and it's a boxing metaphor. Again, I know in Christian circles sometimes we violence that. The whole point is that you give, 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 and then after you've given enough, then you can ask someone for something. So it's more give, 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 ask. Give, 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 ask, as a way to interact on social media. So I think this would be a great idea for us as people in the church. Like, I always think of like children's ministries. Maybe they could develop a Twitter account that's like daily parenting tips, or daily free stuff in our area that you can go do with your kids, or something where it's inherently valuable. Every parent in the area wants to know about this, and then occasionally you can mention, by the way, we're having something big at our church this weekend. And then after you've mentioned that a few times, you go back to, and here is the Children's Museum is having a sale where you can get 4 tickets for the price of 1, or whatever. And just make it to where people just want your content, and therefore you're helping. And then when you ask for something, because of the law of reciprocity, maybe they're more excited about taking up on the offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. I've got my own comments about that, but I think Daniel has some things to say regarding that.
Yeah, more just to affirm Paul's use of the jab, jab, right hook. I remember a couple months ago, I watched a little video with the author and just loved it, because that model really does a good job of setting the tone of, it sets that trust basis. So like you're giving, people get to know what to expect from you. They understand that what you're giving out is trustworthy and maybe predictable is a bad word for it, but at least somewhat consistent. And that the next time, once you've given out a certain amount, when you actually want them to do something, they're more willing than if I was to go up to some guy in the street and say, hey, I need to borrow your phone. It's probably not going to work. And this kind of leads into something that I personally absolutely love, and it's being very intentional, and also kind of leading by example. There's one guy in my city who he's the tech coordinator at another church, but he's probably one of the best when it comes to intentionality and always having. He will never ever post anything on his Facebook that is about his day or a problem or anything. In fact, the only thing he ever posts is little quips. Like the latest one was, I was the only one that cared when Jimmy cracked corn. Like nothing, like it's not deep stuff, but I've never seen him post anything bad, and so I know what to expect from him, and therefore I'm going to trust it. And I also think with kind of the give, ask kind of thing, in the last few years, society's really changed. It used to be that an advertisement would be designed to bring someone into their store. Come out of your house, come in. Where now if you look at a lot of advertisement marketing, it's all, we're coming to you. And now the tables have turned, and our job here now is, in a ministry sense, is not to draw them in. We're to kind of go out to them, and once we've established that relationship out in their own place, then we can start building something there and bring them into our kind of realm.
Okay. I like it. I like it. In other words, give them a reason to trust you first, rather than asking them to take all the risk, right? Okay. See consensus on that. So just quickly before I jump over to Zach, I've been taking some notes here. It's interesting how it's so important that consistency is maintained. And if you think about it, you were kind of segueing me into, or segueing us into my comments, Daniel. So thank you for that. So what we're seeing, because I'm also in secular video marketing myself, working for companies and that kind of thing, we have seen a huge shift, like you mentioned, into, well, they call it, what do they call it? Content marketing. But I'm calling it integrated marketing because that's what it is. You have a consistent message that goes out to every touch point, regardless of if it's print, radio, TV, internet, email, everything, it has the consistent message. And it's really important for churches to understand that when you're reaching out to people, regardless of what action you want them to take, visit your website, give you a call, come visit you for a service or an event, how you're presenting yourself in all of that media, all of that marketing is important, because people want that consistency. They want that reliability. They want to know what they can expect from you. And if you're all over the place as a company doing marketing, if you don't have a consistent voice, then people are just going to be confused. Whereas, and that doesn't mean that only one person has to be doing all of this, but the central core message of the church needs to be so crystal clear and so simple that people understand what it is the first time they leave a service. Does that make sense? My business coach, okay, just to bring in another secular reference, when we were going through the very foundational concepts of what a company is built on, mission statement, vision statement, what are your values and all that, he said, okay, I want you to do all of these statements, right, in 7 words or less. Now, how many mission statements do you see from companies that are 3 paragraphs long, right? We could say the same for churches, right? I have a client of mine. It's a little wordy, I'll grant you that, but they're a hospital, and their mission, okay, I don't work for them. I've done a fair amount of work with them, but their mission statement is so powerful, it's astounding. To be the human expression of the healing ministry of Jesus Christ. I mean, that is just, we're going to set the bar up here, because that's how important your healthcare, or your health, is to us. You can't get a higher standard than Christ, right? So I would challenge churches to really think about what it is that you want to be known for. Because right now, unfortunately, a lot of churches are known for legalism. They're known for, if you come to one of our services, we're going to ask you for money. And, various other denominationally specific items, right? What do you want to be known for? Maybe that's a good starting point, and go from there. All right, Zach, I promised I would get to you, so take it away.
Yeah, good stuff. Consistent image, totally, from the bit I've gathered from marketing in general, but especially, when it comes to any social media you decide to integrate into the church, definitely seems to ring for a lot of people. And when you see, and I mean, not that you're patterning it after or copycatting per se any in the secular realm, but when people in their mind, they when they think of a good business image, they think of consistent, consistent. What am I trying to say? Products or consistent advertising that is consistent with their message and what has to do, what they think that that company is for. And so I think when it comes to the church, you just want to take that to probably a super nitty-gritty level, even like so. Like I've been contemplating with our church, and we're a smaller church, but to maybe start getting into using Instagram as a method of kind of connecting on the personal level, and even like using that for like short video clips of infomercial type stuff of like what's coming up or whatever, but even not just that, but to take it from there to maybe have an every week basis, maybe a short recap or a short quote from either the service or just in general that people can, in their mind, they can count on and just be like, yeah, so every week in my feed, this is what's going to show up. So that's pretty much what I've gathered from that.
Okay, excellent. I like where you're going. That actually brought up something else in my head. A lot of churches tend to be insular. They're very introverted, if you will. We're going to have church for us. And you can join, but we've got our club, and we like our club, and you're going to have to be coming for like 2 years straight before you are given access to our club, right? One thing, just kind of dovetailing off of what Zach was saying, one thing my church is known for is we have fresh popcorn and caramel corn every week. It's just something that they decided to start doing from the very, very beginning, and they've never stopped. And all of it's intentional. It's meant to be different. It's meant to leave an impression. And we have coffee, we have iced tea, we have hot water if you just want to make tea, or have hot chocolate or chai, or whatever. It's there and it's available, and it's there every week. And so what you create for those people that come more often than not is you create a sense of familiarity, right? And for those people that are just visiting for the first time, immediately, I mean, we hear it almost every month, the feedback is there's something different about you. And nobody can quite put their finger on it, us included. We don't know what's different. But there's just a different vibe. There's a different feeling there. And I would say that that's something that's pretty cool. We don't know what it is, but it's working, so we're going to keep doing it, right? What do you guys think about that? How important is familiarity for the people that come to church? Who wants to jump in on that one?
Yeah, definitely. It's a sense of community, I guess, and even it's probably a very tangible thing for visitors that come in that are not just seeing the church body itself interacting like, oh, hello, it's just, this has been a week since I've seen you, and kind of the bubble mentality, but they kind of, it probably emanates enough that they are actually, it's a more tangible feeling of it being a togetherness that's probably very appealing. That's a consistent thing. Again, like our church just does a Sunday morning, 9 o'clock. It's 20 minutes before the Sunday school Bible study hour, but we do donuts and coffee, and it's not, in and of itself, is not really that big of a deal, but it is a consistency. And you even notice, like, if somebody is out of town and forgot to tell whoever else to go pick up the donuts for them or whatever, and it's like, it's not like it's Armageddon or whatever, but people just kind of, you can tell something's missing. So I think that principle probably applies to a whole lot of different things, when it comes to that. So
Awesome. Charles, we haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, as far as the familiar, I can't even pronounce it, but you know the term we've been talking about. Every church is going to have something that they're known for through a mix of the people that are there, hopefully for good reasons. And also, in our case, it's demographics. With us, you know, our church is small, and it's kind of the only church of this denomination for like an hour circle around. So there's a lot of people that commute to our church. So one thing that makes us unique is that we have lunch every week after our services. So that's something that makes us unique, you know. But like I say, sometimes that's just a matter of circumstances. It's not like anybody designed it to be that way. It's just you don't see each other but once a week, so why not just stick around after church and have lunch instead of scattering right after the sermon? But back on the consistency part as far as web presence, consistency is definitely a must. Because when we first got started with our social media, there was two of us doing the social media, and we really didn't talk to one another and just kind of posted what we felt like, and it did kind of look kind of scatterbrained. But I will admit now I'm kind of the only one posting. The other person's kind of lost motivation, and they're not posting as much anymore. But if you do have a team going, there probably needs to be, and I don't mean to sound like authoritarian on this or anything, but you do need to kind of have a team leader to kind of help encourage that consistency, somebody that's kind of detail oriented, because there's different personality types, but if you get a bunch of people that are the lovey-dovey dreamer types together, they're all going to go off in a tangent and they're never going to kind of settle on one common idea. So having somebody in the team that's a glue that kind of drives that consistency is definitely a must in any social media presence.
I'm hearing the word mentoring. Anybody else?
Well, that's part of it, isn't it? I mean, if you want someone to learn how to do something and you're good at it, just hoping that they get good at it isn't the same as helping them to get good. So I think mentoring is a great way to do it. This is something that the 20th century failed miserably at. You know, the model in the 20th century was go to a class, you'll get good at thus and so. And that's fine. I want my doctors to go to classes. I want my lawyers to go to classes. But so many tasks can be taught relationally, and you can just pick up little things from watching someone who is really great at it do that thing. And I think that that's something that we've lost, but we're seeing come back in some ways. I mean, you know, my most of the video stuff that I know from experience. I took some classes, but I didn't go to film school, unlike you, Tim. But it's just one of the things that I have such a drive for it that I've sought out mentors either in paper form, in video form, or some of those people that I started out just reading their books have become mentors in real life for me. And that is really something I think where we can really grow a lot is by interacting with each other. And if you're good at something, you show someone who isn't, and vice versa. And next thing we know, we can all get better at being friendlier, being more loving, and maybe, just maybe, our churches can be the kind of places where we're known as people that love people, not people that hate things that we disagree with, which I think would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Forgive me here, I lost my key light. So,
I thought you hadn't paid the electric bill there for a second.
that would be bad.
Yeah.
That would be really bad. You know, I like where this conversation is going. It's been kind of free-ranging, to be sure. And I like this concept, just to take us back a few minutes, that Charles was saying, advertising versus ministry. And he's absolutely right. A lot of churches, when they're first getting going, in their minds, success means backsides and seats, right? We need numbers.
Or hit count.
Or what?
Or hit count
Yeah, exactly.
on your website, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's all about numbers is, essentially the point. And I think as a church, capital C, as, a collective, we've lost sight of what our mission really is supposed to be. And I love the movie The Matrix. And, regardless of what side of the fence you come down on regarding that film, I think it is a perfect example of what the church was always meant to be. Going after people's hearts, setting them free to live a life of freedom in Christ, right? Because they are imprisoned, even if they don't know it. Now, there's a whole interesting story about how the Wachowskis wrote that without any agents, and studios wouldn't touch it, blah, blah, blah. We can get into that offline. But I think we need to refocus, and I think the church is beginning to do that. These non-denominational churches, you're getting pastors that are, really trying to focus back on hearts and focusing on people, because numbers don't mean anything, honestly. You could have 1.5 million hits on your website, but if you don't have anybody in your church, to me that's telling me that you're not really connecting with people the way that you need to. Because if people are being connected to at the heart level, then they're going to want more. And they're going to come and seek you out because you're the one that was providing that. As a vessel, with God's power and all that. Not you personally. We don't need ego trips here. Get enough of that on social media. So, I don't know. What are you guys thinking here? I'm feeling like I'm rambling again.
I think you make a very good point. There are so many things in the church where the heart is the most important thing. Sometimes we hear people say, well, that's just rock music. No, it's the heart that makes it different. Those are those crazy lights. No, it's the heart that makes the difference. And I think that if you have a room that's just chock full of people that aren't engaged on a heart level, that's a problem. But it's also the case that if you have nobody in the building, that's a problem too, because that's an unused resource that could be used for connecting people. One thing that I believe wholeheartedly is some people say they don't want to be about the numbers, but each number is a person, and every person in the world is someone that Jesus loved enough to have died for. So I actually want 100% of the people in the world to know him, and I want all our churches to have a horrible problem of not knowing where to put all the people. And I want that to be the case, and I want all of them connected. And I think it's a both and I think that that's a good point to bring up, is that it's not the case that you can look at a church and go, oh, well, they're so huge that clearly they're evil. Or you can't go, well, they're so small, clearly they're closed-minded. No, it's not that easy. I wish it was, because then you could, like, pretty much narrow out the weed from the chaff pretty simply, but it's just not that way.
All right, now I'm really going to throw you guys a curveball, and we're getting down towards the end here, but let's say that you're seeing somebody engage online in a way that's probably not very conducive to the message of Christ or to the message of their church. Do we, as brothers and sisters in Christ, have a responsibility to address that, or is that the responsibility of their local church? Zach, you're smiling. You get picked on.
No, that's interesting. Well, I mean, you want to. I mean, obviously depends on what the relationship is, but if they are a brother or sister in Christ, then it definitely behooves you to go and to approach them in a spirit of not necessarily rebuking them, depending on obviously what it is, but yeah, to maybe talk about it with them and see where that's going. So.
Zach's laughing because I'm writing funny things in the. Well, me and Daniel are writing funny things.
I guess that's why everybody's frowning, because they don't want to get picked on.
They know me too well. All right, Daniel, since you were trying to hide your smile, you get to go next.
Yeah, well, luckily you gave me some time to think about what I was going to say. Thanks, Zach. I think if I came across it, I mean, I deal with everything on a case-by-case basis, so there's not one formula to go by, but depending on what my relationship is with them, like if I'm just a complete stranger, I may not do anything, because I have to be careful of how's that going to make myself and the church that I'm related to look. But if I'm able to bring up the point in such a way that comes across as loving or teaching, then I'm going to totally do it. But I definitely don't want to make them feel like a complete idiot either, because all of a sudden they're not going to be responsive to any kind of life lessons.
True enough. True enough. And just quickly, before we jump to Charles with his possibly, anyway, we'll get to that later. Kind of something that popped into my head after I asked that question was, are the boundaries between churches, are the walls, either physical or proverbial, shall we call them, are they stout enough, let's say, to keep us from engaging with somebody in a mentoring capacity, or just even in a loving capacity, that maybe needs some mentoring, needs some redirection, or needs some orientation to a Christian perspective, because we all lose our way, right? I mean, that's fair, right? We get emotional, we get caught up in I'm right, you're wrong. We get caught up in doctrinal issues. We get caught up in contextual arguments. Well, they meant this. No, they didn't. They meant this. That kind of thing. We all get caught up in that. But if somebody's, particularly, I think in my case, if I see somebody that's giving advice that's contrary to the Bible, I feel called, regardless of my relationship to them or not, to say, time out, hang on a second. I'm going to make some points here, take it or leave it, but this is my perspective, and maybe you'll think about it, right? And it's not to say that I'm correct, but if I see somebody leading another person down that path that's not biblical, then I feel I have a responsibility to step in and at least offer an alternative viewpoint that is biblical. Does that make sense? Okay. Charles.
Yeah, the thought that kind of came to my mind is when you brought up this topic is the challenge between mentoring and meddling. And also, this is kind of really all tied together. The challenge between mentoring and meddling combined with the fact of web presence and consistency from your church. We've probably all seen this in our churches at times. We might have somebody that's really well known in our church that could be a very positive influence on the community, that could, win a lot of people to our churches or, help share the gospel with that. But they take should I say, a left turn down in life, and their social media starts reflecting, say, I don't know, I'm going to probably sound super uber conservative here, but, a drinking, smoking, partying lifestyle, right? But yet they're known to be a part of your church, they're known to be leaders in your church. How do you address that issue? From a standpoint of, you got to have consistency in your church, and these people are not representing your church appropriately. But yet, at the same time, you want to deal with the situation, but not meddle in their lives. So, that there's a real deal that kind of ties us all together. How do you deal with a situation like that?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the Bible actually answers that question. I don't remember if it's Matthew 18 or not, and I'm not able to look it up in time. Maybe one of you guys can look it up real quick and see if I'm on track here with the right scripture. But I do know that there are instructions, and I'll paraphrase, that essentially say if a brother stumbles in their walk, and it doesn't look like they're able to pick themselves up to get back to the path, then it's the responsibility of two brothers to come alongside them and guide them back onto the path. That sounds like it could very much be defined as meddling. However, I think that there is also, or at least should be, an unspoken agreement between brothers and sisters in Christ to say, look, I've made a public declaration that I'm a Christ follower, that I am going to be following, I'm going to be following Christ, duh. And part of that is making decisions in my life that are very difficult and being faced with situations that are very difficult, temptations and the like, and I'm going to stumble. But the agreement is that if you see me stumbling and I'm not asking for help, you'll be caring enough and compassionate enough to at least come alongside me and say, I'm here if you need me. This is what I'm seeing. I want to make sure you're okay. And come at it from the perspective of the heart, not from the perspective of you're doing wrong. That's how I would advise handling it. What do you guys think?
I kind of want to tag off that because we had a speaker at the camp over the summer, and his big thing was talking about the kingdom of God. And he spoke one night about what exactly does that entail, being a part of that community, and he actually touched on that very thing, and talking about how as we join this community in this kingdom, not only are we agreeing to follow God in our own lives, but we're also agreeing to being the support for our brothers and sisters and being supported by our brothers and sisters. It's those three main things that is part of joining the kingdom of God.
Sorry. I keep muting myself and unmuting myself, so it takes me a second to get back up there. Excellent point. Excellent point. Zach, why don't you chime in here?
Yeah, that's a good thing. Wasn't quite totally focused on this, but yeah, it's let me read the comments here real quick. Yeah, it's when it's always in the spirit of wanting to I mean, getting back to social media, you always you obviously aren't going to do it in public in front of people or whatever, unless it's something dreadfully heretical or something that they've said. But it is in a spirit of wanting to see where they're coming from, and definitely if it's clouding the image of the church, whatever social media presence there is, yeah, you definitely want to make sure that doesn't cloud the image of the church. But yeah, when it comes to talking with other people, I think meddling, crossing the line to meddling, would be like saying something to them once and then kind of repeatedly mentioning it to them either in person or something. I don't know. I see that as more of, and I know for me, in my experience, it would be definitely something more rare. But yeah, it would. If you see something that isn't right, or something that they're saying on social media that you feel like should be addressed, then definitely by all means do that. But yeah, always in the spirit of love, and with the thought that you can restore them.
Well said. Well said. Charles, thank you for posting that. So we've actually found the scripture that refers to this. Paul, we haven't heard from you in a while. Would you mind actually just reading that 15 through 17, if you could?
Yeah, let me see here. I've got 15 and 16. Let me try and expand that to 17 here.
Okay, while you're doing that, I'll just tell everybody what we're looking at. We're looking at Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17, because it actually addresses the question directly. And I think it was your question, right, Charles? Yes, I'm getting a nod. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Excellent.
correct. Sorry, it took me a while to get to the mute button, and I will admit it was kind of a tainted question in the sense, because I kind of knew where the answer was going to come from, and also as far as the difference between meddling and mentoring, to really mentor someone, you have to have a relationship with that person. Whereas if you're seeing it on social media and you know the person at a different distance, like you've seen them at church, but you don't really hang out with them, to kind of get involved in that situation is where you kind of get into meddling. To truly mentor someone in those situations and to follow, this reference to Matthew, you have to have a relationship with that person first. And unfortunately, if nobody in the church has a relationship with that person, it makes it a very sticky situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Paul, you want to read that for the good people that... Oh, we have one viewer. So, can you read that for us?
Yeah. Let's see here. Let me scroll back here. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be a tax collector. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. And I think that's great.
Yeah. Did you read the part about if they won't listen, you take one or two brothers along?
Well, let me see here. I might have skipped 16 by mistake. Yeah, I did. Here. Sorry. Let me get you verse 16, which is, But if he does not listen to you, take one or two more with you, so that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every fact may be confirmed. And then it goes on to the church. So the model is, if your brother sins against you, you go, and then you take a couple of other people, and then if that doesn't work, go to the entire church. And I think that really you can even make that secular. In fact, I've brought this in secular kind of ways and say, look, if someone is offending you and they're a friend, just go talk to them. And if that doesn't work, take someone with you that you both trust, you know? And then after that, if you're part of a group, talk about it as a group. And maybe, just maybe, one of those steps is going to restore the relationship.
So what do we think about that? That's the biblical model. Do we like it?
Not easy.
No.
It gets you out of your comfort zone, that's for sure.
Well, I see it as, specifically as it relates to us men, it really requires us and asks us to be men of courage, to have those conversations. It's much easier to check out and say, oh, well, I'll pray for them, right? In fact, it would be interesting to see the actual tally of prayers that actually were prayed versus prayers that were promised. Just putting that out there.
I think there's a cultural piece to this, and I mean the culture of your church, not the culture of North America. I think that you can get to the point where it just feels like the right thing to do, and I've seen that in my own church, and I'd really encourage you guys to lead up to your pastors to preach on it and try and just make it the default that if you hear someone complaining about somebody else, you stop them and grab them and take them to the person they're complaining about. And just in a, it doesn't do any good for me to talk to Daniel about this thing that Tim did to me. Doesn't help whatsoever. Tim hasn't done anything bad to me. I liked him a lot. But that's the whole point. It makes us feel better temporarily, and then we want to complain some more, and it festers, it grows, and this is how church stuff happens all the time. It's just crazy. I actually lost a job at a church because no one bothered to talk to me directly until it had blown out of proportion. I said something half joking that someone took as something serious, and it just got horrid because no one said, wait, what did you mean? It would have solved the problem. Craziness. So if that helps you, remember that story of a time where if someone had just said, what did you mean? I could have said one sentence that would have straightened everything out, but instead it festered for like 2 weeks, and then it became this craziness that I had never meant. And finally the pastor talked to me, but then it was too late. So that absolutely happens. And just think of these situations, and more than once I've been on the other end where I thought, did they mean that thing? That's crazy. And then I talked to them and no, they just used the wrong word, or I heard it wrong, or most of the time that's what it is. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was really offended about something. I said, well, why don't you find out the facts first and wait to be offended? You got plenty of time to be offended. Plenty of time. But if you find out that you were wrong, aren't you going to feel a little stupid that you got really offended for this last week when it turned out misunderstood? Oops, sorry. Didn't mean to spill bile on everybody.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, myself included, have a tendency to we hear what we hear, and we react to what we hear without getting all the facts. So that's a great point, Paul. Excellent point. So maybe we could just sum up this section of what we've been talking about with the 2 commandments that Christ left us. Love the Lord your God and love others. Would that be fair? Okay, excellent. So I want to tie all this together somehow, some way, and get us back to web presence. So does somebody want to tackle tying what we've just been talking about to web presence? Because I can, I'm just letting somebody else have the glory if they want it. All right, fair enough. So with web presence, I think the same summary could be used. Love others, right? That's what we were left with as far as horizontal relationships, right? So if you're going to engage with other people online, if you're going to be putting posts out on social media, if you're going to have a website, make sure you have consistent messaging. Make sure your mission is clearly communicated to your members so that when they post about your church, it's consistent with what you stand for. If you see people engaging with others, either in real life or online, in a manner that's not consistent with that message, then I think it's our responsibility to either approach that person directly or find an intermediary, say the pastor maybe, to at least voice your concerns. Not from a standpoint of they were wrong and they need to be punished, but from a standpoint of genuine concern, not necessarily for what was said. I mean, that has its own concerns and that kind of thing. But if it's out of line with the core message of the church, then the person either doesn't truly understand what the message of the church is, or maybe there's something else going on in their personal lives that somebody needs to step in and help them and help support them, encourage them, whatever it is they need. Even if it's just taking them out to coffee and saying, you know what, tell me what's going on, or finding out, they can't tell you what's going on, but they're going through a rough time. Hey, you know what, let me pray for you right now. Again, loving others. So I think we need to approach people at the heart level and be concerned for them at the heart level, not the intellectual level. What do you guys think?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
I agree, totally. It's all about people. If we're thinking about anything other than people, then we're messed up.
All right, Daniel, you got one last shot to say something.
I got nothing like intense to say, but I think I mentioned it kind of in the chat thing. I think above all else, the big thing to be asking where your mind is at all. Where's your head? Are you speaking in love? And where's your heart? Are you speaking out of love? Or is it to further your own political or agenda, whatever? Yeah.
Charles?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything. Don't really have any good closing comments. I think you summed it up well.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining in this discussion. I think it went really well. I think it's I know it's been valuable for me. You know, as we've been talking, I've been seeing how I have erred, and you know, thinking, okay, like Daniel said, where's my heart at, right? So I think if we just start there, that will have a huge impact on not only what is said, but being more perceptive about those times when we maybe should be silent and not say anything. So anyway, thank you guys for your time, and really appreciate it. Love having these HOAs with you guys. And before we go, anyone want to toss a topic out for next time? Bueller, sorry.
What about like continuing training for tech teams?
Okay.
Just something that I'm in the midst of thinking about. The next thing that I think I'm going to launch is like an online set of courses that, you know, churches all over can say, oh, yeah, go take this course, or, you know, that's the kinds of things I'm thinking, and I don't know. Could be a stupid idea, or maybe not.
There are no stupid ideas.
Mm.
I'm tired of
I was thinking along those same lines. You know, Paul's sitting here thinking about, you know, constant training, constant improving yourself, I guess, in a mental fashion, or, you know, that. What about maybe on the next session we all come back with an idea of a neat trick or a neat new tool that we've learned? Because I know, Tim, you shared a while back on the Church Tech community a link to the, CrowdMics app.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a neat thing that I'm going to play with. You know, it may or may not suit the needs of our church, but, you know, maybe we can all come back with a neat new tool for each of us to try to see if it meets our needs. I don't know.
I'm down. All right. So, training it is. And how I'll figure out some really awesome way to contextualize that. But for now, we have a working idea. Awesome. Well, once again, thank you guys. And we are off. Thanks for watching.